What's up everyone? Welcome back to my home studio. I'm Cordeiro, printer at David Krut Workshop. This follows on from last week's hand printing relief demo that we did with LINOCUT. Today I'm going to show you guys a few different things. One is how to layer color LINOCUT. So we're going to print a second layer on top of the first layer that we did last week. After that, I'm going to show you guys how to prep for a bigger, more refined, more finished layered print on 300 gram Ash cover white. In my spare time, I have already printed the first layer of that complete print, so I'll show you guys how to do the next three. So we'll end with 4-layer LINOCUT that's all hand printed. Today though, I'll show you how to prep in acetates. I'll show you guys how to prep color and a few tips and tricks such as drawdowns and color comparisons, so you guys can see what color you're mixing and how that color translates onto the paper before you actually ink. These tricks are really useful and help a lot with preparation and save you also a lot of time and energy. So welcome, this is another hand printing relief demo. Okay, so before we start printing the big one, I'm going to show you guys how to test colors and get a sense of what they'll look like once you print them without going through the process of printing the colors. So I'm going to show you guys a process that's called a drawdown, which helps you see what the ink that you're mixing or the color that you're mixing translates like onto the paper that you're printing on. So I have a sheet of Ash, which is the same paper that we're going to be using to print the whole plate in layers, and I have 4 different grays that I've laid out because that's the color that I want to be printing this plate with. I printed the first layer last week just to get a head start on showing you guys how to layer, and this is the first color that I put down. I'm working the ink well the same as what I would if I was about to ink up, and I take the spatula, push it along just so that I have about that much on the end. Then I'm going to take my paper, put the spatula tip down like that, apply pressure and pull. Then when I get to the end, I'm going to lift and pull down. So you have an area of the ink that's saturated into the paper and the area of ink that's sitting on the surface, because those two colors will read slightly differently once it dries. Now you can see what that gray will translate to onto the paper. So you can see the slight difference between the ink slab and the color that it translates to on the paper. That way we can get a sense of what each of these different inks will look like. I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to do it as close to this previous one as possible just to see what they look like next to each other. So there you have your color swatches. This is particularly useful when you're trying to match a color or when you're mixing color with an artist or for an artist. And these are the processes that you'd use to compare different colors and then slowly add what you need to get to match the color exactly. What you would do if you're matching a color is you would take a corner of your sample color, that much on the tip of the spatula, and you would put it down like so. Clean your spatula off, take a corner of the color that you're mixing to match and put it right next to the color that you're mixing, and then do your drawdown so that the colors sit next to one another, like so. So in that way, I could see that I'd need to lighten this color quite significantly to get to that. And I'd repeat this process each step that I change the color that I'm mixing to match the color that I'm trying to get to. So this is a very important kind of trick or process to use when you're matching colors. Now that I have my color swatch, I know exactly what my colors will look like translated onto the paper once I print them. Okay, now that we have our drawdowns and our colors right, which I pre-prepared, I will show you the next thing that I've prepared and how I did it. I won't actually physically go through the process of showing you guys because we've pretty much done acetate preparation and registration preparation in almost all the previous videos, both for LINOCUT and dry points. Here's an acetate registration that I prepared. It's black outline, as we ran over before, is where the paper fits. This is the first layer that I already printed before this demo, just to make sure that the ink is dry. This has been drying for about a week, just to make sure that it's dry and ready to add another layer to it. So that's been prepared. This black line is paper registration. Paper's been tabbed here to prevent it from moving. And each of these color-coded outlines are the different layers that we'll be printing. So the first layer that's been printed over here is run 1, and that's in purple. So what I did to print that layer was line up the plates with the purple. So traced out outline of the paper, and then outline the plates, and then I know that that's my registration for the first layer on the print. I turned the plates 90 degrees from the middle points over here. How I did that was with the etching needle, the dry point needle that we made before. So there's center points of acetate and the center points of the plates. When those two are lined up, because I'm using a circular plate, it's rotating on the circular axis. So run 1 is the purple. Run 2, as we can see over there, is in blue. So that blue outline is the registration for the second run. So in the next video, when we start printing and layering this plate, this will be the second run that goes on top of that layer. Run 3 is in red, as you can see. And that's another 90-degree shift. So when we print that layer, we'll line the plate up to the red outline. And the final layer is in black, and that's run 4, another 90-degree shift. So at the end, it would be 4 different prints of the same plate layered on top of each other, rotated on the plate's center axis each time by 90 degrees. Different plates in different orientations require slightly different registrations, but it's a similar kind of process each time you print. If the plate was square, you'd have the square registration that you'd line up your plate with each time. The key about making a registration is that you want to be able to put the plate down and register it in the same spot with relative ease each time. So I can take it off without much preparation. I can line the plate up in exactly the same spot again. So it's ease of reference and a repeatable process. And preparation is key in that regard, because you want to make sure you know exactly where to place your plates so that you can create perfect additions. So the better you can repeat the process, the more consistent your additions will be, and that's what we want. The more layers, the more different colors, and the more different registrations you have, the more complicated the process is. And this one is fairly complicated. Okay, so as I said, we have this setup, which is the same as the last video. Same lino plates, same registration, same process of taping the paper down so it doesn't shift. The difference is we're going to be printing a different part of the plate. In the last video, we printed this section of the plate, and now we're going to overlay this section of the plate on top of the one that we printed last time. So in the last video, we printed in a really dark gray. This time, we're going to overlay with a lighter gray to see what that does. Okay, so as before, I have my roller that I inked up on the slab and my second pieces of tape to prevent ink going on registration areas, and I'm going to start inking my plate up. So when you're mixing different colors, different inks have different pigment to modifier ratios or pigment to binder ratios, which means that your inks are going to be different. Colors are going to be different. They're going to sit on the plate different. They're going to be different viscosities, and that means that you'll really have to pay attention when you're inking up the plate. I'm happy with that. You can see the consistency is inherently different from the black or the darker inks that we've been using. It's an orange peel, but it looks more eggshell-like, and that's the consistency that I want to keep and that I want to go for this particular color on this particular print. Cool, now we're ready to print. Okay. So I'm going to pull these inking tabs off. Lay this down gently so it doesn't shift. And start printing with the spoon. So again, you want to hold the spoon like so. Place your thumb on the inside to apply pressure, and then start printing. You'll notice in this case I'm not using backing to print, and I'm doing this just to show you guys that it is possible to print without your backing. If you don't have access to it, or if you're finding it difficult, it's not working for you, it is possible to print by hand without a backing. You just have to be a bit more careful of not tearing the paper with the amount of pressure you're applying with the spoon. It's a very important one, because especially with this thinner notebook paper and the quite intricate plate that I'm printing, the detailed intricate plate that I'm printing, too much pressure or the wrong kind of movements could tear a hole in the paper, and then your print will be ruined, and we don't want that. Okay, now we're gonna lift the print and see what transferred. That's what we have. Because Lino's prints like a stamp, the white areas that you carve become transparent. So you can see the different layers and what sits behind and on top of each of the different layers that you're printing. And that's our print. You could repeat this process as many times as you want to, as long as the paper holds up to the printing. With hand printing without a backing, if you don't have a backing, the paper does take quite a beating at the back, but if you're careful and precise enough, you could build up quite a few layers. The issues you will run into eventually with layering LINOCUT prints is that the layers on top will start to squash and bleed, and that's because you need to modify the ink as you're layering. The layers that go on top would need to be looser and thinner than the layers on the bottom. How this process was explained to me was that when you're making a peanut butter and jam or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you always want to put the jam on top of the peanut butter because it's thinner and looser. If you try put peanut butter on top of jam, it'll smush and bleed everywhere. And that's the same thing that happens with layering relief prints, is that you want to make sure that the ink that you're putting on top of the previous layer is looser or more viscous than the layer beneath it. So we've reached the end of this prep video. Please leave any questions or comments that you have on the video, and we'll respond as soon as possible and as concisely as possible too. Stay tuned for the next one, which will be us printing this monster 4-layer LINOCUT by hand. I think that'll be pretty cool. Again, thank you for watching. Hope you guys are keeping safe and well, and hopefully see you in the next one.